the Texas Bitcoin Foundation and the Texas Blockchain Council, we share a mission in that we are trying to educate policymakers and the public about these sort of topics. What else can we do to advocate against CBDCs?
Yeah. So a couple things. One is, of course, write to your senators, write to your congressional representatives. A CBDC would happen at the federal level. So targeting the Texas congressional delegation is the best thing you can do in the near term as a citizen. The good news is Senator Ted Cruz actually has introduced legislation in the U.S. Senate to prohibit the Fed from issuing a CBDC, from managing, direct retail accounts. The challenge with that legislation, and by the way, Representative Tom Emmer from Minnesota introduced the same legislation in the House. So there is opposition to this. The challenge with it is that these bills target the Federal Reserve. There is also federal legislation called the eCash Act that was recently introduced that would order the U.S. Treasury to issue a CBDC. And so there's a contestation about which, department should own this project if it were to go through at all. And it likely will be snuck in. This is just my point of view, but I suspect that it will be snuck in as part of some omnibus bill that is so long that nobody reads the whole thing, part of, budget legislation. And so this is the challenge. You could make the case, I think many have, that the U.S. Congress is no longer a meaningful deliberative body. In other words, we don't actually debate legislation in Congress anymore. We sort of rubber stamp legislation that has been years in the making, often, away from the public eye, and through a political process that bears little resemblance to what we understand as, how a bill becomes a law. And so I think probably the most important political project today in the United States is reform of the legislative process at the federal level. And I think a discussion needs to be had about the scope and mandate of the federal government. In general, I think having the federal government do less could be the thing that ends up protecting a sphere of civil society, not because, the federal government is good or bad, but because there are relatively few things that you can do effectively at a scale of 400 million people. That is a lot of people. And so I think before any CBDC is implemented at that scale, we need to have a conversation as a country about federalism and the importance of civil society.